All right. Welcome, Hornets fans. It's draft night. I'm Richie. I'm joined by Spencer and Brian today here as we are approaching the start of the draft. I also got a guest joining us today, Dylan Jackson, who's very involved with Hornets community. Dylan, how's it going?
Doing good. It's draft day. Been waiting a while for this. Big decision ahead. Glad to be here.
Yes, very good. I want to thank all the viewers and the listeners that are joining us right now. We've got YouTube going on, Facebook and Twitch, and then also on Twitter Spaces as well. If you guys are participating in the chat on YouTube, we will have a trivia for 6 months free of BuzzBeat Plus, which we will get the trivia out here soon. Also, be sure to give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. The most recent one that we received was a couple days ago, where it says, I've watched the NBA and the Hornets for years, but love how this pod breaks down the tape and builds my knowledge of the game. So we appreciate hearing and listening to those things as they come through. All right, so here's the deal. There's been a lot of rumors leading up to this number 2 overall pick. Number 1 overall pick is set in stone. We've got it down to Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson. The draft odds have been going back and forth. Let me first put this out here because I feel like there are some opinions here in this room that are different. And I'm going to start with you, Dylan. In terms of if you were to tier these players, think of it like a staircase. Like how many steps are between Scoot and Brandon, or are they on the same level to you?
Yeah, I have them on the same level. Like if we're talking like if I had to quantify it, I would put like, Wembanyama at like 100 and then kind of compare everything off of that. I would probably put Scoot around like a 95 and Miller 94. I think they're very, very close as prospects. That might be a little bit of an unpopular opinion among like, the Hornets community and whatnot. But again, I don't really think you can do much wrong with a 6'9" forward who has, the shot creation that Brandon Miller does. I'm higher on his handles, pick and roll ability. I think that they're very, very close prospects.
And Brian, I'll pass it to you and Spencer as well. But I feel like I tend to lean here with Dylan in terms of the gap between these two. You guys have been very high on Scoot, which he is also my preferred pick at number 2. I just don't think it's going to go that way. But I've also been trying to sell myself on Brandon Miller as the pick. To Dylan's point, having a 6'9" forward that can do a lot of different things on the offensive side. Yes, he's still got to get a little bit stronger on the offensive end and defensive end. And, the inconsistencies finishing at the basket have been an issue. But I would say, like Dylan, like maybe just a couple steps below. I don't feel like the gap is that big, but I do feel that Scoot has a higher ceiling than Brandon Miller. I do wonder how much of the fit and the need is kind of playing into this decision.
Yeah, I mean, I like Brandon Miller a lot as a prospect, and would slap a top 4, top 5 grade on him. I've still been pretty consistent liking Amen Thompson slightly above him. Like I would probably put those two guys on the same tier, along with probably some other guys like Asar Thompson, Cam Whitmore, Jarris Walker. But I sort of have Wembanyama on his own tier, Scoot on his own tier. I've watched a lot of Brandon Miller games, probably, 10, 12 full games of his from his 1 year at Alabama. Came away pretty impressed, but never like quite overly moved. I've looked at all the numbers. I've rewatched games. To me, the handle and the passing have never popped quite as much as I think those that are like more bullish on Miller than I am. I think he's going to be a good player in the NBA for a long time, but I think a guy like Scoot is a franchise-altering player, an advantage creator, a guy that you can build offenses around. As much as I like Miller, I see him as a best case scenario, or maybe not best case scenario, but one of his better outcomes is movement shooter, gravity bender, that type of guy, secondary creator, all like very in like a solid perimeter defender, all of which are like great to have on your roster, all of which are invaluable, all of which are important, all of which the Hornets need, but not as pivotal as finding someone that you can really build and center an offense around and Scoot. And you only have but so many opportunities, especially if you're the Hornets, to add someone like this. Scoot is younger than Brandon Miller by about 18 months too, which is I think something that you have to mention every time you have these conversations. It's part of the development curve, and I've seen a lot of Scoot Henderson over the last 2 years, and I have been moved watching him play. A special athlete at the guard position, a special competitor. And someone who does pretty special things with the basketball in his hands. And Richie, you said the word that it's been thrown around a lot, whether it's been by people in the front office, backdooring to media people, or it's been at a press conference with Mitch Kupchak. Like, fit is thrown around all the time. And it's not like that doesn't have some seat at the table or matter some. I suppose I tend to think what matters more than just like sort of like positional fit is like culture fit, is scheme fit, as opposed to, oh, are there like wings or not on the roster? Okay, there aren't a lot of good wings. We'll go Brandon Miller. That slots well next to LaMelo Ball. You're still going to have the rim pressure concerns with those two guys, even if Miller really does become like a big time shooter at the in like pull up and pick and roll operator at the next level. So they'll still be like looking for pieces, no matter what, to sort of like round out their perimeter creation with those guys going forward. So I think the fit can slice two different ways. And I don't want to totally write it off, but I do think it's important for them to go best player available, best pro they think best prospect available is. And if that is Brandon Miller, I would disagree with their evaluation, but I could almost live with it. I just would be curious to know like what exactly is the thing that would have someone to think that Miller is like superior to Henderson in terms of like talent evaluation. That's all.
Yeah, they're going to play it off as if it's not fit, because Mitch has said for the longest time that they're not in a position to draft for fit and they need best player available. So they're going to spin it that way, Brian. But one thing that you did mention, and Spencer and I were talking about this before you guys got in here, in terms of the culture fit, I feel like one thing that does not get discussed enough with Brandon Miller is the controversy that he had in delivering a gun. And I don't know all the details to this story, but I don't know why that's not being brought up a little bit more. I know he's a young kid and everything like that, and he wasn't the one that actually did the shooting, but being in the wrong place at the wrong time and surrounding yourself with people that would do that is definitely not a good decision.
Well, and aside from that, Richie, and one of the main points I wanted to make is that Scoot Henderson is, by all accounts, he raises the floor of your entire building, roster, team, organization as soon as he walks in the door. I mean, that's the intel from everyone. I mean, everyone's aligned on that. And Brian laid out the case of pretty much exactly why I think Scoot is a better prospect than Brandon Miller. I mean, look, the whole legal thing behind him, I don't love. He has small hands. I don't love that. His wingspan is quite questionable. Don't love that either. He just had mono and lost like 25 pounds. Don't love that. Now, a lot of these things are in the moment and they don't traverse through time, right? I get that. But there just seems to be a lot surrounding this guy that would personally scare me away, on top of the fact that if I didn't know any of those things, if I was dropped on the earth and knew nothing, and you show me Scoot Henderson and you show me Brandon Miller and you show me their tape, which I have watched much of, both of them, I would leave thinking, if they're both perfect people, I still think Scoot Henderson's the better prospect, far and beyond, far and away. So I disagree if they draft Brandon Miller. I don't hate him as a prospect. I think he can be a lethal shooter. I do think he has some real on-ball chops. I think his playmaking ability is a bit overrated, a bit overhyped. And I've said this to BG, and maybe I've said it on the pod in the past, but I think a lot of his playmaking at Alabama came out of the system that he played in, with great athletes, with high IQ passers, with really good scorers, and most importantly, with a lot of pace. That team played with a lot of pace. And I think the Hornets want to do that too, don't get me wrong. But the SEC is not the NBA. And I think we're going to look back in a few years and we're going to say Brandon Miller is I don't even think he's ever going to be an all-star, personally. That's just me.
Yeah. Dylan, try to sell Spencer and Brian a little bit more on Brandon Miller. And let me ask you a question real quick. Do you think that Brandon will have the capability of playing with the ball in his hands and being something other than just a spacer on the floor?
Yeah, I'm a little bit higher on his handle. I think that, some of the like live dribble passing stuff, I'm very high on. I think he managed to pick and roll very well. I think his ability to get to the rim is obviously the biggest weakness, right? Like that's something that he's going to have to improve if he wants to be like an all-star type of player. Like he shot like sub 40% at the rim in the half court. Obviously he got better over the course of the season, but that's going to be something that he's going to have to improve and continue to work on. But I mean, I am a fan of just his overall offensive game. If you look back to his high school stuff, like his biggest strength was his mid-range game. I think he's extremely crafty and creative with how he gets to the rim. I mean, he can finish with both hands. He could drive with both hands. I'm just overall, I think the skill level is extremely high, and to be able to find that in a 6'9" wing is incredibly rare.
Yeah, those are all good points. And like, I think the sort of like live ball, multi-hand playmaking translates to his passing too. Like some of the best passes he had this past season at Alabama, out of ball screens or out of like pin downs or dribble handoffs was left-handed too. Like he is skilled. I just think he needs space and time to set it up. And when he has those two things, it looks pretty good, actually. Like those are the like his sort of like most skillful pull-up shooting moments are like when he has time to set things up. I think it's when he gets pressured, you speed him up, and the handle isn't enough to sort of like it's not functional enough to sort of like constantly beat guys. And that's also like when he gets crowded like that. That's what I think when his passing, if he's a a B plus passer at 6'9", I feel like when he gets crowded, like he becomes smaller and like certain reads get closed off. And that's probably true of like every ball handler. Like you're seeing pressure, like, it gets harder to make passes. Like everyone's going to make mistakes or whatever. But I do think like pretty consistently, that's where he tends to fall a little short. And he was just as poor as his half court finishing was this past season. It got better. He's still very reliant on his length and his size for those finishes. So, on the next level, I think he would need to lean into the craft and his craft a little bit more and get a little bit more stronger. If he is going to have that type of like jump finishing on the next level. If not, he's going to be, very jump shot dependent. Which he could still be a good player, and like a plus offensive player, and a guy that you run pick and rolls for, you run some of your movement sets through, you run some of the offense through him, you get him, he's a 20 whatever % usage guy. Like I think that scenario exists even with him being like a mediocre rim finisher. I just think a guy like Scoot, like his ability to touch the paint pretty much whenever he wants to, plus the mid-range shooting, plus the passing is just, I just think it's undeniable. And it's something that Miller can't recreate.
Well, the only thing that's missing from his game is a reliable jump shot. And he's 19 and change, whatever Scoot Henderson is. I think there's a lot of things from Brandon Miller's game that I could question. And the only thing from Scoots that I can really question is the jump shot. And I'm willing to bet in 5 years, when he's still only 24 years old, that he's going to be a reliable jump shooter in the NBA. And so from that standpoint, it's almost like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I think there's nothing, Richie, you said it on the last pod. There's like nothing major with his shot that needs to get like overhauled. And I think there are plenty of positive indicators, including the mid-range shooting, that makes you think like given some time, yeah, he's going to become like a pretty good three-point shooter. And he also does like winning player stuff off of the ball already too. Stampede cuts, moving without the ball, hitting the offensive glass.
Great
And
cutter, BG. That jumped out like watching his film. I was like, oh my god, I would have never expected a
yeah,
6'2", 6'3" guard to be this good of a cutter.
I thought it really popped 2 seasons ago with Ignite when he was getting to play like off of Dyson Daniels and Jaden Hardy, especially. But it still pops this season too. There was one sort of like 5-out backdoor cut reverse layup finish he had against Met 92 during the first Vegas game. Yeah, he can really play without the basketball, and it just doesn't take a. It shouldn't take a genius to think of all the different ways that you could pair he and LaMelo together as like dual ball handlers in the backcourt.
All right, the Spurs just drafted Wembanyama. No surprise there. We were talking about this on the lottery pod, how we moved up to number 2. It just felt like it was obviously great that they moved up 2 spots, but a little bit of a disappointment that they couldn't land that number 1 overall pick. And it feels like, the Hornets being the number 2 overall pick with Victor being a shoe-in for number 1, it almost feels like the number 1 overall pick because of the indecision and people are trying to predict what's happening because this was a no-brainer here. But I do have a trivia for the people that are here live with us on YouTube or Facebook. And I will give out.
Yeah. Just keep going. Keep going.
Okay. I'll give out 6 months free of BuzzBeat Plus. But the question is this, speaking of Alabama, which Alabama Crimson Tide player was drafted the highest in NBA history? And I'll give you a clue. It was in the mid-90s. So I'll put that up on the screen for a little bit longer. But go ahead, Brian. Are you tipping a pick here?
Yeah. According to Shams Charania, the Hornets will draft Brandon Miller with the number 2 pick in the 2023 NBA draft.
You guys are so dejected. Oh man. Now, Callie, I'm like I said, I've been trying to sell myself on the pick today, and I'm not probably where Dylan is, but I'm getting closer to that. Just knowing that you can have the two-way versatility of a 6'9" forward, the shooting and the spacing and the scoring, and the one thing that he did not show in Alabama, but he did show in high school, which I'm interested to see, is the consistency in the mid-range. And Brian, you talk about not getting all the way to the rim and being knocked off his path and being able to get stronger. Maybe he can kind of return and revert to his ways from high school and start knocking down shots from the mid-range. And that's one way that he can kind of counteract teams running him off the line. But that's just one thing that I'm trying to sell myself on, the two-way potential of the 6'9" forward for Brandon Miller. But you guys seem a little bit dejected right now. I'm going to go ahead and play some highlights from Brandon Miller to try to raise your spirits.
I'll add here that I think Brandon Miller's the type of guy where, when his shot isn't necessarily falling, one thing that I always tended to notice is he was trying to affect the game, whether it was with his playmaking, whether it was with, the defensive things or rebounding, and all of like the little sort of things. He would always sort of put an extra emphasis on it when he was shooting, like 4 for 14 or 2 for 10 or whatever it was. That's kind of one of my big takeaways is he's always trying to affect, winning basketball. And I think that's sort of rare in like a college prospect on like the, best team in basketball, best player on that team. I think he's somebody who's going to be able to affect, winning for the Hornets, whether, how little or great his role is that rookie year.
All good points. He was a good defensive rebounder. He competed in that. Moves without the ball offensively. I think that's going to be part of his role. I don't think his role in the NBA can be just like, I don't think it's ever going to be, this guy runs, 24 pick and rolls per game. Like I think Scoot Henderson was going to be one of those types of players. I would just say, the front office, they better be right about this. They better be right. because if not, this is. I mean, I think this is a pretty severe misevaluation on their part, or it's a decision they made for what I think are miscalculated reasons amidst an ownership and regime change.
Spencer thinks this is an MJ pick.
Well, no, yeah, there are so many layers to get into here, and let me start by saying, and I want to get back to what BG was just touching on. I think I think that why we got a lot of conflicting reports today, I think part of it was that new ownership was trying to influence their opinion on this pick, but it was clear from reporting last week, I think it was last week, that MJ would have control of this selection before the transition was officially made. So I think that's why you saw some of that. And then if you want to get real conspiracy deep, you can say Vegas was paying some people to say some stuff so they could get action on both sides. So that's kind of how betting works. I back to what BG was saying. I'm like Kupchak, and maybe he doesn't care. Kupchak's not a young spring chicken anymore, but hopefully the people that work for him care. The writing's probably on the wall. The guy's not keeping his job if this doesn't work out, which I think is kind of sort of what BG was getting at. Mm-hmm. So I expected a very careful evaluation, if not a big swing, to draft Scoot and then maybe trade him. And then maybe bring in a Zion. Maybe do something crazy to try to save your job and your colleagues' jobs. This is just what happens when new ownership comes in the door. So for this to be the pick, from just that standpoint, it is certainly disappointing. And you can never downplay. And I don't have a lot of energy left to give to it. I'm not going to go into the MJ thing, but we've heard enough now to where it does feel like this is an MJ pick. And this is, when you have that kind of you're that competitive, when you got that much pride, when you got that kind of brain, everything that guy is, it's a blessing and a curse. And I said this to you and BG and Dylan before we got on. I think we've already seen the blessing. Maybe he's the best ever. I think we're living the curse. And to me, I don't need any more evidence. The guy's an awful owner. He's been an awful owner for a long time. He was gifted this franchise, and he's leaving this franchise. In my opinion, time will tell. This might be wrong, but the last decision he made for this franchise, I'm pretty certain, is going to be the wrong decision, and that is just icing on the mother effing cake.
You don't think he's going to stick around for pick 41 tonight? You don't think he's going to be in the war room for the next 3 hours? You don't think he'll hang around so he can, can help them land on Coleman Hawkins or whatever in the early to mid second round?
What's the most popular nightclub in Charlotte right now? I'll buy him a suite myself to go away. I'll buy him a suite with his buddies just to go away. Get away from the decision making. I'm over it. I'm tired of it. I know I'm. You know
where they're partying more though is Portland's war room. They're doing backflips right now.
Do you think
this guy just fell to the Scoot Henderson fell to them? Like it's a joke. But look, we all know that it's hard to build a sustainably good winning team in a small market. Now, the Hornets have made it far more difficult for themselves by chasing bad money and chasing bad deals for years now. It's hard. It's not easy to do. And the draft is also hard. It's inexact. It's impossible to predict with any certainties. There are no guarantees. And unfortunately, that's the main method of building when you're in a franchise like Charlotte's position. But I will just come back to this. Like everyone who was a part of the decision-making apparatus that wanted Miller and ultimately pushed for this to become the deal, they better be right. Because if they aren't, I think this is something, if Scoot is the prospect that I think he's going to become, that I don't think anyone should ever live down. And I'll certainly be pulling. I pull for all these guys to do well, but I'll be pulling wherever, if Scoot Henderson is in Portland for the next 20 years, or if he gets shipped in a trade to New Orleans tonight, wherever he is, I will be hoping, I'll be pulling for that guy pretty hard. I'll be pulling for him pretty hard too when he gets matched up with the Hornets, because if this goes wrong, I want it to hurt. I want it to hurt everyone who was a part of the call here.
Hey, not to just to switch gears real quick, because you don't get to pick your family. Your family is your family. So I will be a Brandon Miller fan now. I will be pulling for this guy to be successful. I echo what BG just said, but I just want to say, the first day on the job, probably first month on the job with Brandon Miller, he's got to get stronger.
Yeah.
Like, guy's got a lot of skill. I said it earlier. I don't think I would be willing to guess there's a chance he's never going to be an all-star. I don't see it. But the first thing that the Hornets have got to do is they've got to invest in his strength and his conditioning. And a lot of that was out of his hands, getting mono, after the season. But he cannot come into this next season, which is sooner than we think, at the weight and at the physique that he has right now. That is 1A priority.
I'm going to pose a question to Dylan real quickly, since he is kind enough to join us here. And then I think maybe we could all sort of bounce off of it a little bit here. But year one, I care less sort of about, like, I care less about starter versus come off the bench, etc., whether he closes games or not. But what do you see sort of like, what do you think is development wise, if you're thinking development with Miller, what do you think his usage pathway looks like next season for Charlotte in terms of like role, offensive role, ways Charlotte can involve him, both to like get production out of, but sort of in ways that you would hope sort of like long term are part of his his offensive repertoire?
Yeah, I think as a rookie, I think the ideal scenario is he almost has like a Jason Tatum rookie Celtics type of role where, you're using him, in a catch and shoot, you're using him off of screens, you're running pin down action for him. You're doing a lot of different things for him off the ball. And you're also helping him, helping him with his handle, helping him with sort of the more on ball stuff, working with him in that regard while he gets better. But I think a lot of his role, initially as a rookie is going to be as like a catch and shoot, purely off ball type of player, especially if you do return like Terry Rozier, if you do re-sign Miles Bridges. I'm not sure how many ball handling possessions he's going to have offensively. And then you also hope that, with added weight, he's able to contribute, off ball and on ball defensively. So I think you're ideally getting like a high level, 3-and-D type of player as a rookie. I'm not sure, how ready he'll be, especially with, the weight thing. He had mono. How much weight is he going to get back? I'm not sure if he'll even play well in the summer league because he is so thin right now. So I think ideally you do get that, high level 3-and-D type of forward wing player initially.
Yeah, I think the off-ball stuff is exactly right. And, putting the ball in his hands is probably not something that you want to do early on. That was something that you could probably bank on with Scoot Henderson. And obviously Scoot plays a different position altogether. So you would expect a point guard to have the ball in his hands. But some of the off-ball stuff that you're talking about, I can definitely see. I can also see him being someone that would thrive in transition as well. And I know that the Hornets love to push pace. And there's a comment here about where is he in the rotation if Miles and PJ come back. I view Brandon more of a 2/3 more than a 3/4 because of his strength and his just his frame overall. I know that he is 6'9", and we had this conversation too about Rozier, like how much longer, is he on this team? Is there a possibility that he gets traded this offseason? The Hornets do have plenty of picks
Tonight.
attached.
Is there a chance he gets traded tonight?
Tonight? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking, but who knows? I think that would be one way to free up minutes for Brandon Miller, because as of now, I know Brian said don't talk about the rotational stuff, but as of now, he's going to be competing and fighting for a starting job. And we know with Clifford, he definitely makes rookies earn those minutes.
I would say, to touch on your point there, Richie, Miller, Miles, PJ, assuming PJ and Miles come back, that is an interesting 2 to 4. It
Yeah.
is like there is some interchangeability there. That intrigues me a lot, and we'll see. I mean, we don't know what PJ is going to get offered in the open market, and like, good luck gauging anything about Miles Bridges' market. But that is very interesting to think about the lineup machinations that you can kind of you can stir up with those three.
Yeah, I think, as he progresses, like year 2, maybe he's like hunting mismatches. Maybe he's doing a little bit more on ball. But as a rookie, I'm just not sure how effective he's going to be in that role. And I will say that, now that I do view him as like a big guard, like a 2.
Yeah.
I think that that's definitely going to be his best role, especially with some of like the live dribble stuff I was talking about, with some of the pick and roll ability from a ball handler standpoint that I was talking about earlier. I think that, maybe trading Rozier. I'm not sure how much value you would get tonight, but I think that it's probably the best decision if you want Brandon Miller to have like a heavy role this upcoming season.
BG, by the way, Sports Channel 8's tweet 3 minutes ago.
Yeah, there's been a few.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
Go check that out if you haven't.
Yeah,
Drafting Alabama athletes with lethal arms. Oh boy,
that was not my tweet.
I didn't know if that was your art or not. Yeah.
No, that was not. But yeah, like, I mean, I think ultimately for Miller, and again, this is tough. Like, the Hornets had a chance to get Scoot through no credit of their own. No executive level deal craft or anything like that. Just like literally they lucked up the night of the draft. They had one thing. There's only one thing I think they had to do tonight, and they whiffed. But if you are going to think more about Miller's role, again, I think having a guy with that size, secondary creation, secondary passing, the movement shooting, I think you need to lean into that like as much as possible. Ghost screens, floppy action, pin down, different kinds of like 5-out looks you can get to him. I'd sort of be intrigued. Like, if you do want to tap into the pick and roll stuff, I think like when they go to the 5-out delay action, have him in the corner, have him come off a pin down into the dribble handoff. Like, I think that stuff's going to be important, especially if he's playing like the 2. Yeah, like it's going to be another caliber of defender for this guy to have to go up against. This is not him going against SEC small forwards and power forwards. This is going to be, NBA perimeter stoppers. So it is the handle, the passing, the things that the shot making, the things that were certainly like the biggest part of his sell as a prospect. They'll be tested. But I think as far as role goes, I think you need to like lean into movement shooting as much as possible. And if you are going to put him in the pick and roll, I think you have to be like deliberate with it. I just don't think it can be like, oh, he's going to, be like they did with Book Night, or they try to like make him like a microwave guy with the second unit. Like, I don't think that's I don't think that is the right call. Also, someone is in the comments saying Scoot's finishing isn't all that good for a guy with that level of athleticism. And
Excuse me?
I disagree pretty strongly. So from an evaluation standpoint, so
one more point I wanted to make, Richie, on the on the Scoot thing. I thought, and I know I said this on some podcasts in the last few months, I thought that he was, LaMelo has that celebrity star power outside of the basketball star power, and I'm not super confident we're not going to sign and trade him. When his next contract comes up. I mean, seriously, I'm not. Like, I don't. If you like, do I think LaMelo wants to be in Charlotte for his next contract? No, probably not. And I thought
then they should have definitely drafted Scoot Henderson to
yeah, right. Exactly. Like he was the perfect bridge. Let them play together. And if they love playing with each other, then that increases your chances of retaining LaMelo Ball. And look, maybe Brandon Miller does that. I think there's a way less probability that Brandon Miller does that over Scoot Henderson. But Scoot was the perfect bridge to the next era of Charlotte basketball when LaMelo Ball goes to wherever, Los Angeles, or So, anyways, that's the other point I wanted to make. But
yeah, okay, we got 2 speaker requests here in Twitter Spaces, and I'm going to open it up to Cam first. I know Lee's requested as well, but Cam, go ahead.
Hey guys,
Hey,
how's it going?
good. How are you?
I'm good. I feel very much like Brian and Spencer. I feel pretty dejected. I thought Charlotte really needed a draft pick tonight that they could like really get behind, and who would be beyond just the basketball talent, which I agree with Brian and Spencer and like Sam Vecini. I thought that Scoot was by far the best prospect, and and from what I've seen, like good franchises don't rely on one game against South Carolina where the guy scores 41 points against a bad team to offset like years.
No offense, Dylan. No offense.
Oh, I know they're bad.
Again, whereas like we have years of like coming up where Scoot, like people said last year, Scoot would have been the number 1 pick over Paulo. This year, going into the year, like, oh, this is, if it weren't for Wemby, Scoot would be, easy the number 1 pick. And what do you want him to do? Like, would we have been in a better scenario? Would he have been better off to be like shut it down after he broke his face instead of playing with a broken face the second half of the G League season? It just. I feel like this is a huge miss just on talent alone. And then, I know, Richie, you brought it up, but like, I feel like Brandon Miller, he reminds me a lot of Harrison Barnes, maybe not exactly in talent level, but certainly in like somewhat of status. Harrison Barnes probably a higher rated recruit, but just, big kind of a shooter, like has theoretical upside as like a ball handler, secondary playmaker, but like Harrison Barnes hadn't sniffed an all-star game. I feel similar to Spencer. I feel like it would be a miracle if he made an all-star game, but instead of just Harrison Barnes, we get Harrison Barnes, who's an accessory to whatever. And then the last point on that, like, as I think I've told you guys before on this, like I'm a lawyer. I expect the minute he inks his deal that there's going to be a civil suit against him from that victim's family, in which case, I'll do what they need to do. But like, that's just another crazy legal scenario that Charlotte gets thrown in the middle of after we re-sign Miles Bridges when he does what he did. It's just kind of a mess. And like to Brian's point about like, you better have gotten this right. There is no immediate way to correct this. Like the 24 and 25 draft classes are terrible. Like the 2025 recruiting class is awesome. Like with the Boozers and Flag and like maybe he got the Cooper Flag, but like there's no way to fix this. There's no way to get another star if you're like bad and Melo wants to trade out or wants to be traded and you like want to get some assets for, teams are going to be willing to give up those picks because they're not going to be any good. Like Tyrese Proctor is one of my favorite players in the country. And like, he's probably projected to go like maybe top 10 next year. He's a really solid NBA player. He's not a star. Like I don't get it.
So let's go back. I got a question for you. No, this is good. We got a lawyer on the call. Expand on a little bit without, going 10 minutes or anything. Why, once he inks his contract, why the legal situation comes right back to the surface?
So this would just be like a lawsuit from the victims. What I think would happen, and what I think is going to happen, is that once the criminal matter is resolved and like all the plea deals are entered and sentencing is done, when he signs his contract, he then becomes a deep pocket defendant. It becomes much more, just generally like, if you're a wealthier person who gets sued with any kind of reasonable basis that could survive, like, the initial round of like where lawyers like brief and argue legal arguments, then it gets really expensive and it becomes like really hard to keep things private without settling it. So like you have discovery stuff. It's just, there's a real risk that, and I that even if a lawsuit's filed, I expect that, it would eventually be settled, but how soon does that happen? But regardless, you're going to have a complaint that says Brandon Miller in it over and over and over again for why he was some kind of like negligent in his actions that night, or somehow civilly culpable, not criminally, not like jail time. This is all just money. But it's still out there, and it's going to be on SportsCenter, and that's the only reason that the Hornets are ever in the public sphere is because when their players do terrible things, or when they do something dumb like draft Brandon Miller at not dumb, but that's where I am on that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that was good context there.
It's interesting. I'm just reading. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, and now we're moving on and hoping Brandon Miller does fine. But like, did y'all see, before I hang up, did y'all see Scoot's face when they panned to him when they drafted Scoot Miller? That was terrifying. He is going to bust our ass for the next 15 years.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past
Those rocks
them.
were shiny.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
take it easy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
See you, man. Thank you.
Now, I was going to say that I guess some Hornets draft parties are not going well. A couple of boos, even at the arena, I think, is that's what's happening as well. But we have a speaker request from Heather. Heather, do you want to come on and give us your thoughts?
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Thank you for having me. So I don't normally do Hornets spaces. I'm a Hornets fan. I'm a Miami Heat fan. I do a lot of spaces with the Miami Heat. I have not yet found my people with the Hornets, so I'm hoping that that's going to change. I do an all-female space with other ladies in the Miami Heat. So shout out Hornets ladies. If you want to do something, I'm here. This is an unserious franchise. Like, I take up for us so much. I really, really do. Like, I'm used to losing. It's fine. I'm a Panthers fan. I live in North Carolina, right? So, like, country girl, obviously, the boys gives it away. There are no words. To have every aspect of the fan base, from casuals to people who really know ball, everybody is shitting on this decision. And I'm just over here like, we can't have nice things. We just literally cannot have nice things. Don't want to take up too much time because you will not find me speechless often. But this, like, we have Miles Bridges for whatever reason, like if we're going to keep him. Don't know what's going to happen with PJ Washington. Like, we have, some forwards. I just feel like Scoot was the much better decision. I don't know what the thinking on this is. LaMelo Ball cannot do everything. He has clearly shown it.
Do we think LaMelo had any say in this decision?
Huh?
Do we think LaMelo had any say in this decision?
I don't know, because when Brandon Miller did a little interview, he called LaMelo his guy. But I mean, I feel like they all do that, we all want to think people are our guys. So I don't know how much to play into that. But it would be a bad decision if he did, because you need another scorer. We have some forwards that have been okay. Like, they've been pretty good. Like, I'm not happy with Miles Bridges' situation. I'm trying to keep that separate, because if he's going to play, then, might as well be here if he's going to do well. But we don't have ones and twos. Like, we have LaMelo. He I think can be okay, but he does make some stupid decisions. I've got to see how this plays out. Because I'm just every year.
Hey, Heather, first and foremost, get rid of the Heat. Just, Heat culture is garbage. Don't listen to it. Don't buy into it. I beg of you.
You have to understand.
Get rid of it. Okay.
listen, I know Cody and Caleb, so I have to.
Oh, okay. All right.
It
Fair
is what
enough.
it is. Yeah, I'm friends with their mom. My kids grew up with them. So, but as Hornets as the hometown team, because I live in North Carolina, I have more love, but they frustrate me to no end.
Well, hang with us. Hang with us. Hey, look.
I'm trying, but thank you
Richie,
guys for letting me speak.
No, Heather, thank you for coming on. Richie, I love this. This might be the first female that's dialed in ever.
It's true.
Heather, we gotta, you gotta
change
recruit
that.
more.
Any
Come on,
other ladies that come through, I will do a Charlotte Hornet Ladies Spaces with you all day, every day.
Love it.
Hit me up. We've got to do it because it has worked so well in Miami, and that's not even my home base, but I still love it. So, absolutely, anybody who wants to come through, hit me up. We will start one up. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
All right, I do have one more speaker request if you guys are okay with it. I know you guys are a little bit dejected, and Dylan, if you need to bounce at any time, just let us know. But Matt S., I know that he's joined us before, but go ahead, Matt S.
Hey guys, I'll echo everybody else's sentiments. They're pretty disappointed. They didn't go with Scoot. He is the type of guy that I think will be even better than LaMelo. And LaMelo's, we're all seeing him as a future, face of the franchise. But I think those guys could have worked together. But even if it didn't, you have, a good asset that you could get back alive. If it's not going to work, you give it some time. And if it's not going to work, trade one of them. But I don't know. When is Michael Jordan going to finally go the hell away from having any control over this franchise? They're selling it, but yet they gave him control. Maybe this wasn't his pick on his own, but I just feel like this is like his parting shot. I'm going to screw up another draft for you guys. Goodbye.
Yeah, we were talking about this is really his last dance. So they may put out another documentary about this one, Brian.
But this is what I was saying to you guys before the recording started, and just to sort of like bounce off of what the first speaker said is like this has been built as a big time draft for a long time, mostly because of Wemby, but also because of Scoot Henderson and then Brandon Miller. Probably benefiting some as like the top college prospect in the country. Like he played himself up into this being a top 2 to 3 prospect in this draft. But and some of this stuff is based off projections. So like we don't know how exactly it's going to play out, but the next 2 draft cycles are not projected to be nearly as strong as this one. So it's like even if the Hornets land themselves with a top 3 pick again next season, which I don't think they will, but if they did, it's probably not going to come with them having the ability to draft someone that could alter the franchise and sort of alter the offensive trajectory of them like Scoot Henderson. So like whomever made this decision tonight, if it doesn't go well, it's gonna hurt them for a while, right? Like there's a chance that it's not just like even like a 12-month sort of like bump. It could really hurt for a long period. That's sort of like independent of whether Scoot goes on to become like an all-star at Portland, but like or wherever he ends up. But just something to consider. Like they may not have another crack at the machine like this for some time, which is sort of why there were, I think, a lot of eggs in the basket tonight.
Well, BG, if I can jump in for a second, I think that's why it's so interesting, specifically with this pick, where this new ownership group really invests their time and their resources. If it's theoretical, if Brandon Miller goes wrong early. They could, we just watched the Wizards, and albeit they had a long time all-star that they should have traded 3 years ago. They finally traded it. Now it's a fire sale, but it is this is unique. You do not see an ownership change like this, where the owner going out the door controls the pick and almost seemingly holds it hostage and then makes the pick with the new ownership group coming in. Like this could go a lot of different ways, boys. Like,
Yeah,
I will be very interested to watch how it plays out.
compare this to like the way Ishbia took over with the Suns, which was basically like it felt like he was like pushing for a Durant trade. Like it felt like the transfer of from Sarver to Ishbia, if I'm remembering that correctly, that was like accelerated so Ishbia could kind of like get in there and be like, no, like we'll make this deal happen. And so yeah, it was different with this ownership group, the old one that was making the sale, sort of like staying on to oversee the draft. And I guess also maybe the parts of the start of free agency as well. So
I wonder how kind of different the tone of tonight would be if the Hornets got the 3rd pick and the Blazers got the 2nd pick.
For sure, I think it would be way different.
Yeah.
I think they would have.
Like
I think they
LaMelo
would
did.
have. I think they
LaMelo
would have ended up with the exact same player, by the way. But yes, I think the vibe would have like people probably would have been disappointed the night of the lottery that they didn't get 1 or 2, but they would have ultimately come to grips with, all right, we're going to pick 3rd. There would have been some debate between Amen Thompson and Miller, but Miller having like the consensus behind him would have made him the preferred one, and they probably would have been pretty happy with that. Like ultimately,
Okay, but hold on. All right, no, great question, Dylan. I don't disagree with you, but I think and I'm not saying you're not suggesting this, but opportunity cost is a huge thing. Huge thing. And I think that's really the point that I think Brian and I are trying to make, and amongst others, like the opportunity cost and the tax you're going to pay on that, anything can happen. It's going to be great. So that would be the main difference between 2 and 3. And, that's kind of this draft, right? There were 2 transformational talents. And then the rest of the draft was, all right, here's small start. Here's some tier 2 players. Here's some guys that are going to start for a really long time. And the draft always plays out 5 years later different than you think draft night. So anything can happen. But opportunity cost is the main thing.
Another pick that just came in, looks like there was a deal of sorts between the Pacers and the Wizards. Pacers going with Jarris Walker with the number 8 pick. I love that pick for Indiana. I love what the Pacers have going on with Matherin, with Halliburton, Miles Turner now, and then
Walker's
adding
awesome
Jarris
too.
Walker. Pardon?
He said
Walker's awesome.
Well,
too.
yeah, Walker. Yeah, he's a stud. Like I mean, I think he's a top 5 type prospect that they got at 8. He fits them perfectly. The guy's built like a tank. He's got playmaking upside. He's just built to be a like rotation player and contributor with some upside, but just like a rotation player and a contributor and a guy that absolutely plays on like postseason rosters for a decade. He's a stud. And it like has some like small ball 5, potential as well. And I kind of like him as like a short roll passer if those opportunities do come around. But yeah, they've just got some good stuff going on with the Pacers. Magic going Anthony Black at 6 is I don't think that's exactly where I would have gone with that pick, but I do like Anthony Black. I'm still like a little mixed on like Dylan. Do you think Anthony Black is a 1 on the next level? Like, do you think that's his like he's a primary initiator once he gets to the NBA?
I think that's probably what the hope would be behind drafting him.
For
right?
sure.
I think he's a good athlete. I think his first
sure.
step's really good. Pick and roll game is really good. I'm just concerned that he's not going to have the gravity that you want from like the 6th overall pick. That's not like a center. I'm a little bit concerned about his shooting projection, but I mean, it's a huge lineup in Orlando between him, Franz, Paolo, Wendell Carter. I think it's a fun pick, and Bol too. And they have another pick at 11, but I think the more shocking selection for me is I know the NBA was like he was like a huge riser throughout the process, but Bilal Coulibaly going 7th overall, and the Wizards trading up for him. I mean, it's probably a good spot for him considering there's no real expectations for that team, at least in the short term. but that feels like a not ideal value.
No, I think that I think that's just much too high. And I think there are reliably better prospects on the board. This was a pretty transcendent rise for Koulibaly, especially within the last couple of weeks. Like, he gained a lot of steam, and I think people thought like maybe OKC was a team that would have targeted him, but it seemed like certainly at some point someone gave him a promise. I guess maybe it was Washington, or maybe they moved up so they could try to get him. Whatever it was, that one does surprise me.
I think it's a unique situation because of like the playoff series that was going on throughout the pre-draft process. I think it was against Oswell. I haven't seen anything like that. I think the closest thing was like maybe Frank Ntilikina in like 2017. He might have been a part of like a playoff team in France, but to my knowledge, I haven't seen anything like a rise like that from like a prospect that was considered like borderline first round. So, I mean, he's a fun player for sure. I had him at like maybe 12 or 13 on my board, but it feels too early.
Yeah, agreed on that. I like the Rockets getting Amen Thompson. This has been like probably not a great offseason for Houston. We'll see what they do in free agency and how they build out this roster. But having that kind of like, he is a special athlete, a really, really special athlete, a guy that could be a guy that creates offense for you with the basketball, could be a real sharp defender. I thought Thompson was on par, if not a little bit better of a prospect than Miller. So Houston's got a lot of pieces. I'll be curious to see like how they put it together. But man, building up around Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Tari Eason, now Amen Thompson. They've still got Ty Washington, Martin Jr. Like, there's just a lot of interesting pieces there. I'm not surprised they went Thompson at 4 at all. That did not. I think what would have been pretty fascinating would have been, like, I'll pose this to you guys. If the Hornets had gone Scoot at 2, do you think Portland would have gone? Let's just say they're using the pick and keeping it. Do you think they would have gone Miller, or would they have picked Thompson at 3? Like, my guess is they'd go Miller, but I think there's a chance that like Thompson could have perhaps usurped him for that pick as well. And then I guess Houston would have gone Miller, but I'm probably wrong speculating that way.
Yeah, it sounded like Amen had a great chance to go number 3.
Yeah.
I think it was going to be a real decision. And I'm not like the biggest Amen fan. Like the jump shot. I mean, he's a phenomenal athlete and he's a phenomenal table setter, but
ridiculous athlete,
and great table setter at his size and his length and his vision. But boy, that jump shot really scares me. But here's the question I have right now as we sit in the draft: is somebody going to trade up for Cam Whitmore, or is this like there's some serious medical issues going on here?
Yeah, that came. I mean, he missed basically half the season for Villanova. This is a guy like one of the youngest, lotto prospects. A guy I really like Whitmore a lot. Like, he's built. I mean, his physical profile is like Bridges-esque. Like 6'6", 6'7", strong, incredibly explosive athlete, big time first step. Can play above the rim and a bunch on both sides of the court. Had some like pretty fun flashes. I wouldn't say he's like a weak side rim protector, but had some pretty fun flashes, like protecting the rim. He had a monster block on 2 monster blocks on Manny Bates during one of the Butler games this season. But yeah, this is interesting with Whitmore for him to still be hanging around. Like, that's a guy that, I mean, Magic fans would be, I think, doing backflips if he fell to 11, because I think I knew some Orlando fans that were interested in him at 6. Like, if he actually slid to 11, that would be value-wise. I get that the medicals could be concerning, but that would be a pretty nice pickup. But we've still got, obviously a few more slots to go before that would actually come to fruition. But it must be so much fun to be a Magic fan. Like, this rebuild didn't even take that long. And like, just looking at the collection of talent they have.
Well, they didn't waste time trading off the guys they needed to.
They made at least one great trade. The Vucevic for
trade.
Carter trade,
Yeah.
plus they get
Yeah.
this pick. I mean, just a heist on their part.
Oh my God.
They luck up. They win the lottery last year. They get Paolo. They nailed the Franz pick the year before. We'll see with Suggs and Cole Anthony, Anthony Black, Markel Fultz. Like they've got all these. Like it's incredible how much young, lottery type talent they've got on this roster. Plus, like at least 2 cornerstones already with Banchero and Franz that are going to be there for a long time.
Quickly before you jump in here, Richie, but they're not at the Memphis fork in the road, but they're approaching it. Like I do think this team might turn the corner next season, and to Brian's point, they're going to run into that situation where they're going to have to start trading away guys because they're going to have so many solid players who have shown promise and gotten to the rotation and are coming up on rookie extensions that it's just like we can't pay all these guys. We got to trade them, and those are exactly the harvest lands that contenders are looking for. Is those teams that do it the right way. They run to a situation where they have so many players that are promising and have shown promise and are due up for more money, but small market can't pay them.
All right, I know we're kind of up against an hour here, and Dylan has been so gracious with his time. I want to wrap by talking about potentially a player that could drop to 27. I know that the Hornets have 4 more picks. I've been talking about how they need to consolidate, whether that means taking the 27 and 34 and packaging those to move up, or doing something similar to what Indiana and Denver did, where you take 2 picks and you trade it for a future first, just to kind of get off the 5 picks. I just don't think that you can roster 5 picks. I understand that the new CBA allows for 3 two-way players, but five to me is just too much. So I'm going to throw out a name, and then I'll pass it to you, Dylan. And Dylan, you can even go GG Jackson if you want to talk about your South Carolina player there, or anyone else. Now, do you guys know if Bryce Sensabaugh was invited to the green room? I feel like he wasn't.
I don't think he was. No,
crazy.
Surprising.
Yeah,
he's closer to a lottery talent in my mind than he is like the number 32 pick in the draft or whatever.
Yes. I don't think he's going to make
medical issue right now. Yeah.
I don't think he's going to make it to 27, but that's a guy that I wonder why he was not included in the green room. He's a guy that has tons of catch and shoot efficiency from behind the arc. He's a very smooth player, physically very strong. He allows him to get to his spots in the mid-range. He can fight through contact. He's a guy that wants the ball in his hands in big-time situations. And, he's just a big-time shot creator. So if that guy started creeping closer to 27 and the Hornets had a chance to package 2 picks to trade up, that would be a guy that I would definitely target. And I've talked about Marcus Sasser before, but I won't rehash that. But Dylan, go ahead and give me somebody kind of in that range.
Yeah, so there's really 3 guys that I've kind of been looking at in that range, and I'm kind of the mindset that we're probably better off trading this draft pick. I think that, as things stand currently, it would be hard to trade a first round pick. And I don't think they can trade one of their picks until like 2026, if I'm not mistaken, due to like the Stepien rule based on the Kai Jones trade. I'm not too sure about that, but I think that's how it goes. But I tend to like, in the later first round, I think usually the guys that are underrated are like the college production type of players, like a Jalen Brunson a few years ago. I tend to kind of like Trace Jackson Davis as maybe like an energy big who can play some defense. He brings a lot of athleticism. I like Chris Murray as maybe a rotational forward who, can score inside. He's obviously not going to be as good as his brother has been in Sacramento, but I think he's sort of a guy that I tend to gravitate to in the late first round. And I'll also throw out Julian Strother. I think he's sort of a guy, a movement shooter, somebody that you can throw out, on the wing who can maybe play right away. Probably won't for the Hornets, but I think that his role is just so easy and projectable.
Those are all great selections. I like Strother. He feels his size, pretty good rebounder on the wing. Hey,
BG.
Yeah.
Sorry, you mind if I go real quick? Because I got to run, and then I'm gonna throw it straight to you. Just a few here. and I don't know how you pronounce his first name, Olivier Maxence or Oliver Maxence Prosper. Love him. If he's there, absolutely love him at 27. The other guy that I would throw out, and maybe this is a little too soon, but this is my draft crush this year. Trace Jackson Davis. I know he's going to outkick his coverage in the NBA. He's going to come in. He's going to be playing important minutes, probably for a contender next season. He's an absolute bulldog. I think he's the perfect small ball 5 for a lot of teams. He's a good passer. You can play him out of the high post. He's a good rebounder. He's a good finisher. He's an explosive athlete. No, he's not a shooter, but like he is the very out of the box small ball 5 that can't shoot the 3, but brings everything else that the small ball 5s that can shoot the 3 can't do. You know, like I just see TGD being an immediate impact player in the NBA, and I know he's not like an immediate need for the Hornets, especially if they bring back PJ Washington. They've got Nick Richards and they've got Mark Williams on the roster, but this is just a guy I want in my system. Like I would not be upset if the Hornets took him at 27. I love this guy, and he's older. He's one of the oldest guys in the draft too. I should qualify that. He's older than 23, but I'm just so sure he's going to be a good NBA player that I greenlight it.
He does
All right,
so
BG.
much like he's a good athlete. He plays hard. He does so much like traditional like big guy stuff well. I think he has really good hands. I like him in the pick and roll. The passing, I'll be curious to see how much some of it translates. Like a lot of it was like very like deliberate, isolated, static, like flat post ups. But he can do other sort of like connective passing and play in pockets of space. I like the Murray and Strother sort of like tall movement shooter picks. I'm a little intrigued by like the big wing creator connector types. Andre Jackson from UConn, who's a great cutter, Ricky Council or Jaime Jaquez, who's played really well this past week. Maybe someone like Leonard Miller from the G League Ignite. I'm not totally sure what his position is, but sort of like a big wing advantage creator. Maybe he's there at 27. That's interesting. Noah Clowney as like a 4.5 that can give you some stretch and some scheme versatility defensively. And I even think like, I don't really love the fit just based off of like the way Charlotte's roster is constituted currently, but I think like Gigi Jackson or Terquavion Smith is like upside creation bets at 27. It's probably not like the best pick, but I would be interested in either of those two guys sort of getting another person who can play on the ball and make shots for themselves too. But there's a lot. It's tough to predict because there's too many ways for this to go. Yeah. Brandon Pajemski and Marcus Sasser would be two other names that I would probably throw out as well.
Yeah, not sure if Pajemski will make it, but yeah, he's another guy that we've talked about a lot on this pod. But we appreciate everyone tuning in on YouTube, on Twitch, on Facebook, on Twitter Spaces. We appreciate Dylan for joining us today on the podcast. You can find him on Twitter at DJ.png. That's DOTPNG. He brings a lot of coverage with college basketball, but Hornets as well. No one did get the trivia question. The highest Crimson Tide player drafted actually is now tied with Brandon Miller.
Is it Robert Ory or Sprewell?
Oh, Ory was a good guess. It was actually Antonio McDyess.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So
cool.
He was drafted by the Clippers, but traded immediately to the Nuggets. So thanks again for everyone for joining us. We will talk to you guys later. Have a good one.